That last one is a little too live, laugh, love for the occasion, but okay, Charles. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime. Crue Trime? Crue Trime? My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day and put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like fun to you, you are in the right place. So make sure that you subscribe to this channel, turn on all of the notifications, and then that way you will never miss one of my terrible stories. Today's terrible story was recommended by a very sweet viewer named Dominique. Everybody say hi to Dominique. So a couple weeks ago on Instagram, I asked what you guys were into, what kind of stories you wanted to hear, and she recommended a story that she has a very personal connection to. The subject in this case is her uncle. I know! So Dominique very, very generously emailed me some background information and some details about the case. And she also let me know that it was very, very important to her family that I honor the victim in this case by telling her story. So thank you, Dominique. She also gave me permission to use as many fart sounds as I wanted, so bet. This is the story of Christina Martin. When police arrived at the wooded embankment off of Stewartsburg Road in Rockbridge County, Virginia, on the afternoon of April 5th, 2019, they weren't expecting to find a murder scene straight out of a Southern Gothic fever dream. But there she was, Christina Martin, 38 years old, slumped in the passenger seat of a wrecked vehicle with a single bullet wound to her chest. And the scene was eerie. Her purse was still on the floorboard. Her coworker was screaming for help, and the man who did it was nowhere to be found. But they already had his name, Charles Holman. This was not a random act of violence. So, to understand how we ended up with a bullet, a ditch, and a manhunt, we have to rewind a little bit. Christina Lynn Martin wasn't some mystery woman with a secret life. She was exactly who she appeared to be. Kind, dependable, an animal lover, friend to everyone, the kind of person who'd help you move a couch and bring snacks. That's high praise, because at a certain age, I'm not helping you move, okay? I'm tired. Born in 1980 to Susie Martin and Ralph Willis, Christina grew up in the tight-knit community of Buena Vista, Virginia. Buena Vista is nestled on the Sunset side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. She worked at Pro Careers, which is an elder care and assistance agency in town, where coworkers described her as dependable, empathetic, and genuinely dedicated to every person that she encountered. She was the kind of personal care aide that would, sit with a nervous patient for an hour just to make sure that they felt safe. Christina was a bright, loving, deeply compassionate woman who spent her days taking care of the elderly, handicapped, and disabled to help them maintain independence and dignity. And that work is hard. It takes a really special kind of a person to do it. And she's basically doing saint work, helping people bathe, eat, get dressed, stay safe, feel seen. She was one of those people who take care of our most vulnerable friends, family. And her kindness was not performative. It was part of her DNA. Christina showed up. If you were going through a hard time, she would bring you food. If your car broke down, she'd drive you to work. Enter Charles Leroy Holman, a 49-year-old man from Madison Heights, which is another smallish mountain town in that area of Western Virginia. Dominique told me that Charles was the third of 4 children born to his family. He was raised between Virginia and Baltimore, Maryland. He was quite the outdoorsman. He loved fishing, hunting, archery, and Christina loved the outdoors as well, so she and Charles really hit it off. They loved to fish and spend time out on the water together. Charles was also quite the artist. He did a lot of airbrush work, on t-shirts and things, and he would sometimes even sell his work at street fairs. I mean, it looks like Charles might have made this shirt for Christina. Look how cute. So years before Charles met Christina, he had fathered 3 children. The oldest one was born from a previous marriage and the 2 others from previous relationships. He was very close to his siblings and his mother. He was a caring and connected uncle, and he spoke to his niece Dominique every day without fail. I'm really trying to strike the balance here between keeping the focus on Christina and also understanding who Charles was and how he got to this point. Dominique told me pretty much he doesn't deserve, for people to know who he was because he's not who he was to them. But we'll get there. The Uncle Charles that she knew was fun-loving and warm, but Charles was known to some inside his orbit as intense and unpredictable, but Dominique told me they didn't know that part of him. When it came to relationships, Charles was extremely manipulative and controlling. He treated women like possessions, not partners, and multiple people would later say that he was emotionally abusive and insecure, and he had a jealous streak so wide you could land a plane on it. Now, before Charles Holman became the central name in a small town murder, he was, still kind of concerning. Let's just say he wasn't really like a pillar of the community that snapped one day kind of a situation. Charles definitely had a dark side, and he had previously served some prison time for a very disturbing, violent incident with his first wife. So basically, he kidnapped this woman and her mother at gunpoint, and he held them in the trunk of his car.
I said, what? She said, yeah.
I don't know how they wiggled out of that one, but thankfully they did, and Charles did some serious time. So as a convicted felon, he then lost his right to possess a firearm. But spoiler alert, Charles decided apparently those rules don't apply to him. So as I mentioned, Charles's family was very close-knit, and his mother was at the very center of it. He also had a 15-year relationship with a woman that his family was very close to, even after they broke up in like 2015-16-ish time frame. So when Charles moved on to his next relationship with Christina, he didn't really bring her around his family. They'd only really met her a couple times, 2 or 3 times. They didn't have a problem with her. They were just still very close to this ex-girlfriend, and you know how that can be sometimes. So by the time he had met Christina Martin, Charles was already in his late 40s, and he had developed the kind of manipulative tactics that only perfect with age, ego, and unresolved trauma. He was very, very insecure and constantly accused Christina of cheating on him. She wasn't. Charles would sometimes corner her, like trapping her in the car or apartment that she couldn't leave, and then he would go through her phone. I mean, it kind of seems like kidnapping was his signature move. So after 2 years of gaslighting and arguing and drama, Christina had enough. And she decided to walk away, which is a choice that she had every right to make, but Charles interpreted that as a personal betrayal. Essentially, he could not handle rejection. Not like a normal adult who just eats a pint of ice cream and doom scrolls through their ex's social media. Normal. But more like an unstable man-child who thinks women are property and violence is just expressing feelings. Meanwhile, he's telling his family that Christina was crazy, harassing him, coming to his work. She wasn't. The reality was, Charles was doing those things to Christina. She was actually very fearful of him, and she reached out to his sister, who told her that she needed to get away and seek a protection order for herself. But Christina didn't want Charles to get in trouble. She didn't want to see him go to jail. She didn't want to go to the police. Now, around the same time as the breakup, or maybe even causing it, early 2019, Charles' beloved mother passed away. And this sent him into a complete spiral. His life was a mess. He lost his mother, he'd lost his girlfriend, who also refused to take his calls or see him at all. He went off the deep end, desperately trying to regain control. So on April 5th, 2019, Charles devised a sinister plan to confront Christina face to face. So Charles went to the Hazlet Road home of Debbie Holloway, who was a former co-worker of Christina's, and essentially accosted her at gunpoint. He forced Debbie to lure Christina to her house under this pretense of needing help with her car. Now remember what I said about Christina, when her friends need help, she shows up. So Christina, accompanied by another co-worker, Kimmy McKinney, great name by the way, Kimmy McKinney. They appeared at Debbie's house, and as they pulled up, Charles appeared, brandishing a handgun. And realizing the danger, Christina immediately sped away. But Charles jumped into Debbie's truck and went after them. Debbie then ran to a neighbor's house and called 911. So now it's a high-speed chase. Charles was locked on Christina like a heat-seeking drama missile. Once he caught up, he rammed the truck he was driving multiple times into Christina's car, eventually forcing it off the road and then into an embankment where it flipped over. With the women trapped inside, Charles approached the car and said, "You just remember, this is for me." And then he aimed his rifle at Christina and fired a single fatal shot right into her chest. Then he fled the scene in Debbie's stolen truck. So police arrived at the scene to respond to this car accident / shooting, and Kimmy had a really bad shoulder injury, but she survived. And Christina was taken to Carilion Stonewall Jackson Hospital, but she had died from that wound. As I said, Dominique told me that before that terrible day in 2019, she was very close to her Uncle Charles and spoke to him every day. But on April 5th, he didn't call. And now in hindsight, she knows why. Law enforcement quickly launched a manhunt for Charles Holman. He was now at large and rage posting on Facebook. He posted, quote, "Why do I feel like my Uncle George today?" So for context, Charles's Uncle George went to prison for life on a murder charge. So yeah, definitely feeling like Uncle George. He also posted, quote, "I did the unspeakable act this evening, and I'm sorry for what this is my last thoughts and my last post to Facebook ever." And, quote, "Perfect is not my name." And, quote, "Sometimes you have to start over, a lot of times it's for the best." That last one is a little too live, laugh, love for the occasion, but okay, Charles. While evading capture, Charles also called his 2 older siblings, including Dominique's mother. And he told them in great detail what he had done, which was very traumatizing and disturbing for them. So later that day, officers did locate Charles in a Lexington DMV parking lot. He was holding a handgun to his head, threatening suicide. So surrounded by cops that were drawn down on him, Charles shouted for the cops to shoot him. I mean, it's the end of the road. You know, he did what he did and he wanted somebody else to just take him out. But after a tense standoff, he threw the gun down to the ground and surrendered peacefully. Now, the handgun that he was threatening his life with was determined to be fake.
What?
And he laid on the ground in handcuffs. He told one of the officers that the real gun, the one that he used to kill Christina with, was in Debbie's truck. So Charles Holman was taken into custody and charged with multiple offenses, including first-degree murder, aggravated malicious wounding, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, abduction by force, armed burglary with the intent to commit a felony, grand larceny, and multiple counts of using a firearm during the commission of a felony. They really stack him up. So in April 2021, Holman's trial commenced in Rockbridge County Circuit Court. The prosecution presented a compelling case detailing Charles's premeditated actions that led up to Christina's murder, i.e., luring Christina to her coworker's house with this bullshit car trouble story and this toy handgun. The defense, notably, did not present any evidence or call any witnesses, but they described this as a love story that ended in tragedy, saying that he was merely trying to talk to Christina, not to kill her.
Stop it.
So after a 6-day trial, the jury deliberated for approximately an hour and a half before returning guilty verdicts on nearly all of the charges. On April 26th, 2021, about 2 years after murdering Christina Martin in cold blood, Charles Holman was convicted of first-degree murder and the accompanying offenses. The jury recommended 2 life sentences plus an additional 65 years. Christina Martin's life was tragically cut short by an act of senseless violence, and her memory lives on in the hearts of those who knew her and loved her. This case serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of domestic violence and the importance of supporting victims in seeking help and protection. According to people who knew Christina, Charles Holman's behavior actually was escalating in the weeks leading up to the murder. He was stalking her, harassing her, threatening her through third parties, but as all too common in these kind of instances, his threats weren't taken seriously until it was too late. But as his behavior darkened, Christina eventually made the healthiest and hardest choice that somebody in an abusive relationship can make. She got out. Even after the breakup, Christina remained vigilant. Friends later said that she knew that Charles was unstable. She knew that he was watching her. And she knew that something wasn't right. But despite her fear, she kept going to work. She kept taking care of people. She kept helping others, including the coworker who called her for help on the day that she died. Because that's who Christina was. She helped people, even when it put her at risk, even when it was a trap. She showed up, and she showed up until the very end. And that is the story of Christina Martin. Thanks again to Dominique for sharing this very personal story and being so generous with your time and information. I appreciate it so much. And a reminder for everyone else, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. There are resources waiting for you. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at this number on the screen here, 1-800-799-SAFE. If you want to know what makeup I used in today's video, look down in the description box because everything is linked. And also down there is the link to a Google Doc. If you have a Crue Trime story that you want to recommend to me, click it, fill it out with all the dirty details. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on all of the other socials as well. That is it for me. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! So Carillion, wow, so very